Good morning. Today we're going to go to Russia and we're going to talk about the rifle that they used during World War II to win in World War II, the Mosin Nagant. The Mosin Nagant was developed in 1891 and became part of the Russian arsenal soon after. The way it came about, and this is some interesting history here, the way that it came about was during the Russian-Ottoman War in the late 1800s. The Russians were still using single-shot rifles. Well, the Turks were kicking their asses, and one of the reasons they were kicking their asses, and this is the interesting part, was they were using Winchester repeating rifles. We'll talk more about the military use of the Winchester, which was actually developed as a military uh, weapon, and later became your deer rifle that you have. So anyway, so they decided what they wanted to do was they got a commission together, and they decided that they were going to come up with a new magazine-fed rifle. So they got Mosin, who was a Russian military officer, Nagant, who was a Belgian, and some other guy that he doesn't figure into this, so I can't remember his name. So they got together and they put their guns together and presented them before the commission. Nagant won, and the the commission liked his idea for a gun. So what happened was that when it was presented before the higher ups decided that they didn't like it. It had too many parts that needed special equipment to take apart. Actually, there was two screws, and they didn't want to have the soldiers out in the field uh, taking their guns apart and having to find screwdrivers to do that. Whereas the Nagant, the Mosin, which actually had two screws also that would need to be taken apart, and they're down underneath the magazine here. There's one here, and then it's back here. The other one, the other one's back here. The way it was designed, and we'll talk about it, is the bayonet. That's a hell of a bayonet. That's 17 inches worth of bayonet right there. Has a screwdriver on the end, so that the guys in the field, women in the field, the Russians had women fighting, would be able to take the gun apart. Everything else is done, and I'll show you, is done with springs and other things that don't require tools. So anyway, the competition was going on. So Mosin, they decided to give it to Mosin. Well, Nagant got mad, and what he did was he went and he ran a patent on the rifle, and because Mosin couldn't do it because he was in the military, and what he did belonged to the military, and there was no patent involved. So Mosin came back and said, "Listen, Ned came back and said, listen, I want the same money that Mosin got because, my contributions to this gun were also important. The Gantz gun was a lot more in keeping with the way that the Mauser was put together. Um, so he took them to court. He took them to World Court and sued them, and he won. So he ended up with the same amount of money that Mosin got for winning the competition. And he also got his name put on the rifle. Now in Russia they just call it Mosin's rifle. Here in the United States we call it the Mosin Nagant. So it's actually I would consider it just being called Mosin's rifle because it is Russian and that's what they call it in Russia. All right, let's see. I think that's our history. Here we go. We got the steel butt plate. There's no swivels. What there are is these holes that go all the way through. And if you were to look at it online, the sling has these long leather things that go through and hang down. Have it in the front and the back, so that eliminates a problem with slings. You have a bolt action. It's a straight handled magazine that holds 5 rounds. Now, one of the interesting things about this, I keep saying one of the interesting, there's a lot of interesting things, is the original Mosin rifle had an octagon receiver, an octagonal receiver. And once the war started, in order to expedite things and make them easier for them to build, they made it into a round one. So mine is 1936. So yes, it's a octagon, which is interesting. You can see there's a star on the ring, and the star means that it was made in the Tula factory, which was southwest of Moscow, and it was actually captured during World War II, and the Germans used it for their own doings, I guess. Um, and like I said, it has a cleaning rod, and it has the way the bayonet goes on. Is we already showed the bayonet, so we might as well do it now. It doesn't really have lugs. It's kept on by the rear sight. I mean the front sight protector. Slides on over the slide protector. Push down and you turn it, and there it is. It's in. Now, once again, that's a hell of a bayonet, and it's also a screwdriver. The Russians they wanted to make sure that things were easy to take apart and put back together again for their soldiers. Whereas many places you have bands that hold the handguards on are held on with screws. These are just held on by these little springs. You push on the spring and it slides off. The the bolt itself, the bolt itself, you need a tool to take the firing pin actually out once you take the bolt head off, and that tool is right here on the back of right here. It's got a slot in it. You put it on there and you go, and you take your firing pin off. All right. I'm trying to think of what else we got going on with the Mosin. It's very simple. It's got a sight with a leaf on it that you can move up, and it goes up to 2,000 yards. The actual effective range of the Mosin was around 500 yards. And one of the things that I haven't shown you on any of the other ones, and we'll get to it when we get to the Mausers, is this is a connected magazine. This one you can't take off. I mean, you take it off, but you got to unscrew it and whatever. So if there's a problem with your magazine, there's you take the button and you can open it up, and you can take your rounds out or whatever you need to do. So that way there you have access to it without actually taking the magazine off. And I'm trying to think of anything else. I think we've just about covered the Mosin. Like I said, there was 37 million of them made, and they fought not only in World War II, but they were also there for World War One, and they were also there for so many other, including Korea and all the different skirmishes. Any support that the Russians gave to people, military support, they would give them the Mosin or the Mosin carbine, which is what I'd like to get. I'd like to get a carbine here. Um, but this is one of the last of the long rifles that were used. And what I find interesting is if you go to Google and you put in Russian soldiers during World War II, they'll show pictures of them standing there marching with these rifles, and that's what I get a kick out of looking up. Like the British soldiers in World War II, and they'll have their Enfields and I have a piece of that history, and there's that's what's important. But anyway, there's the Mosin Nagant, and I'm looking through my notes here, and I think I've covered everything that I possibly could cover. Um, the interesting fact out of this was the Winchester repeating rifles being used by the Turks to kick the Russians' asses in the Ottoman War, and we'll get to that too. We'll get to the Winchester eventually. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. So.